It is time to tackle some creationist claims, and I'm not saying that when it comes to Catholics and science, Catholics have a long history with science, a long history of contribution to modern science. Things like entire fields like astrology, for instance, physics, heavy-handed, because the who had the time back during the Middle Ages, and even into the all the way up through the Enlightenment, even who had time to investigate things in the natural world, astrology, biology, geology. It wasn't just your average people. It was members of the church. It was members of the Catholic Church, the most powerful organization in the world at the time, and for a long time. So they did have a heavy hand in science. They did have a heavy hand in our understanding and development of modern science, modern medicine, even. Things about our culture that are scientific, like the need for hospitals, the need for health care, those kind of things do have a lot of origins in the Catholic Church. I know it's, for the most part, we have a negative image of the Catholic Church here in the Hive, but they have contributed to science, and I'm not about to start denying them that truth. However, there are some modern science topics that the Catholic Church, I don't know where they stand on it, but their apologist, Mr. Brian Holdsworth. We've talked about him, or we haven't talked about him before. Actually, when I was doing videos, I did a video on him, and that's and then in that video he was talking about Darwin, but today he's actually talking about climate change. The name of this video is Climate Activism and Catholics. This makes some wild claims here, and I'm ready to dive into it. Who else is ready to see what Mr. Brian Holdsworth has to say about climate change?
Is one that celebrates both faith and reason as valid forms of knowledge, which means that when those things are working together, the human person is optimized to be what they are as a rational soul. So the last thing that a Catholic should ever be willing to do is to abandon either their faith or their reason, one for the other, or just altogether. And forgive me for saying this, but there does seem to be a lot about the environmentalist and the climate activist movements that do require us to embrace a lot of suspiciously, seemingly incoherent ideas, or at least solutions that you couldn't say that they benefit from the full spectrum of what human thought can offer.
And I think we will agree there, but I think we will disagree on which side of the topic that there is this incoherent or solutions with poor application and applicability.
Both scientific as well as metaphysical and ethical.
I don't know if metaphysics comes into the climate change topic, but we'll see how he tries to shoehorn it in. It's Brian Holdsworth, everybody. Climate activism and Catholics.
That always hits me sideways is this idea that we have to save the planet. This is the kind of language that is inherent within a lot of environmentalist campaigns, as well as green legislative policies and agendas. They say we got to save the planet. Now, the problem with this line of thinking is that the planet doesn't need to be saved.
That's because you misunderstand the message. The message isn't save the planet like the planet's going to die if we don't do something. The planet's going to be fine, and there's going to continue to support life. It's to save the world that is capable of sustaining humans and other organisms in their nice little ecological balance, which is healthy for us and which we require to survive on this planet.
A slightly warmer global temperature is hardly the destruction of the planet or of the world. Apart from us,
It really is, though. Not the destruction of the world, as in it won't support life. It won't support a human. It's that it won't support our current state of life. That's the problem. We want to sustain the world that we live in, the one that we need to survive as humans. Not just, a world, as long as there's a world where life can be sustained, we're good to go. That's not how this works.
it really doesn't mean anything to save the planet for its own sake. The planet has existed in all manner of conditions that we would consider
Not saving it for its own sake, saving it for the sake of the organisms that live on it.
are far worse than what might happen due to climate change. Apart from us and our needs, there's really nothing you could say about the planet or certain environments that makes value judgments about them. For example, the Arctic tundra, which isn't too far from where I live, features temperatures below minus 60 degrees and hardly any signs of life. And that is a perfectly valid environment. There's nothing intrinsically good or bad about it.
It's not good or bad. It's good for things that need a tundra-like environment to propagate and to thrive, like a muskox and a snowshoe hare, caribou, things that live in these environments. They require that. So to them, the Arctic tundra is very good because it's what they need to be able to feed and reproduce and thrive.
The slope of an active volcano with magma and lava and pyroclastic flows, if that's even the right language, I don't know what you call it, that is a perfectly valid environment. The surface of the moon or another...
That is a valid environment, the volcanic slopes. There are crickets that live in the lava tubes, specifically, that's their habitat. It is a valid environment for an organism to live in. And to them, that's very good. They need that to survive. It is good for the cricket to have these active volcanic tubes.
A planet like Mars or Jupiter, those again are perfectly valid environments.
You don't know what environment means if you think a planet or a moon or a uninhabited or dead planet, I guess you would say, with no life forms living on it, is an environment. An environment requires an organism to be present and experiencing it. It's the environment that the organism is. It's descriptive of anyway. An environment it's not an environment if nothing lives there.
The only way that we can say that one environment is preferable or better than the other is if you are judging it based on how hospitable it is to life and especially human life. So any attempt to say that a certain vision or constitution of the planet is better than any other is to say that it is more conducive to providing for human life than another.
More conducive to extant life, just the life that lives there right now. If we're making life it harder for things to live that live there naturally, under the natural order of things, without human interference, then that is a problem.
Any attempt to discuss saving the planet without accounting for human need as like the primary consideration, the center of gravity to this discussion, is completely nonsensical.
Why? Do you think that just because you think that humans are special and stand out among the other organisms on this planet, the main thing that I think that humans stand out about on this planet is that we're destructive and we're making it harder for the other organisms to live? So no, I'm not just going to focus on human need. I think that we need to bring the population down. I think we need to move to greener energies, but Brian's going to have a lot of problems with that. We're only 3 minutes in.
It's smuggling in all kinds of variables and desires without admitting that they are intrinsic to that conversation. In other words, it takes too much for granted. Therefore, any attempt at preserving or protecting the environment must be informed by the fundamental question of what will best promote human flourishing. And sometimes
that's because you have an anthropocentric framework that you're viewing the world for. Not everybody thinks that humans are the super special, end-all, be-all, the only thing that we should care about. Not everybody is on the same page as you. Not everybody thinks that humans are the only thing that matters.
That might mean cutting down a forest. Sometimes that might mean mining coal. It might even mean a warmer climate, but let's not get too far ahead of ourselves here. So when anyone starts to talk about saving the planet or protecting the environment for its own sake, especially at the expense of human well-being, I'd say it's safe to say that they've taken a seriously wrong turn in their thinking. Another serious logical problem that I see unaddressed in the conversations in environmentalist movements is the fact that they are promoting a vision of the Earth that doesn't currently exist. Maybe...
No, they're promoting a vision of the Earth as it existed pre-industrialization. So let's stop with the nonsense when we're talking about climate change anyway.
It could someday, but for now it is only a potential outcome and not an actually existing scenario. And for some people, based on their current systems of belief and the necessity for coherence within those belief systems, that's a valid thing to do. But for certain people, specifically and especially naturalist, materialist, atheists, that is something that you cannot promote without betraying your naturalism and your atheism in the process.
Oh boy. He's going to tell us how atheists can't care about the environment intrinsically by Catholic philosophy, which starts with the precondition that humans are special.
And that's curious because a lot of naturalist atheists do seem to be doing just that thing. On August 3rd, 2019, for example, Richard Dawkins posted to his Facebook page that climate change is the biggest crisis we have ever faced together. And in 2019, the American Humanist Association launched the Humanist Environmental Response Effort for Climate Initiative, in which they said climate change is the greatest threat facing our world. And
yeah, lots of people are saying climate change is the greatest threat that faces our world, including some people that you're going to have problems with here later on in the video. I have watched this through, by the way, and I know his citations and stuff, because I think it's wild that he's wanting to present this as something that humanists and atheists and free thinkers as this are the ones that are promoting. No, anybody in the science fields, this is not a... Nobody else thinks that climate change is... It's a very fringe idea that climate change is not a thing that's happening, and that there's not steps that we can take to try to mitigate it. It's very fringe to think that that's not the case. And the people who actually work in the field are not going to agree with you. He's going to cite people here who disagree with him in a few minutes.
Humanists are compelled to act. So what's wrong with that, right? Well, let me explain. A naturalist atheist is someone who doesn't believe that there is anything more than the natural physical facts that are accessible to our senses.
Agreed. I'm with you so far, Brian.
There is nothing that transcends the natural world like a supernature, let alone a god. Only what can be observed with our physical senses and then interpreted with our intellect is admitted to our understanding of reality. Okay.
I'm with you. I'm with you there. Absolutely.
So if I were to sit down with somebody with those basic assumptions about what is real and what informs their sense of reality, I would ask them, if you could make the world a better place, what would it be like? Like, tell me a few of the attributes of a truly good world. What would that look like? And they might say something like, well, there would be no more war, no hunger, everyone would share their resources, and there'd be...
Imagine all the people.
No more pollution or the burning of fossil fuels. Now, don't misunderstand me here. I'm not saying that this is what every atheist wants or what they would say in reply. I'm just saying that those might be some of the things that a person would identify as an ideal world scenario. The only point I'm making here is that I bet most naturalist atheists can and would be willing to describe a better world that they would want to live in and that we should work towards realizing. Okay, so my follow-up question to that vision is... It's kind of a stupid question, but it's unfortunately necessary. I would ask them, does that world exist? To which the reply would be, of course, no, it doesn't. Which is to say that the world they envision, which is good and right, is not a world that exists. Our senses have never observed it.
I'm with you.
And science has never observed a world like that. Therefore, knowledge of such a world does not come through science, and it does not come through...
Okay, here's where you're wrong. Well, I'll let him finish his thought, but then I'll break him apart.
What we observe as natural physical facts which currently exist. Therefore, my last inquiry in that line of questioning would be, how do you have knowledge of this potential world, and how do you know that it's good? Where does the vision and the inspiration for this good world that ought to be come from if it's not observed in material physical facts? It must by logical necessity come from someone or something.
All right, we've made the leap now. Did you all catch that where we kind of change things up? So I'm going to lay down an analogy here for Brian. He made this analogy about asking the atheist naturalist a series of questions. Now I'm going to talk to him about something here and give him an example to answer this and why he doesn't understand the science at all. Songbirds. Okay, I like songbirds. I think that listening to birds sing is objectively good. I'm an atheist. Not objectively good. I think it's subjectively good to me. Let's say I think that there's something that hearing them sing stimulates in my brain that releases pleasant. I don't know if it's if it's because I have associated with pleasant memories. It doesn't matter. My brain releases the chemicals, the serotonin, the dopamine when I hear birds sing. It makes me happy. So whether or not that's objective doesn't matter. It's happening. When I hear the birds singing, it's objective. So cats, felines. I love cats. Cats are adorable. When a cat purrs on my lap, it releases serotonin too. But the cats, when they're outside, they kill the songbirds. No more songbirds, no more happy. No more happy in my brain. That's already impacted the environment. There's already birds that have been driven to extinction by invasive cats. So we don't have those songs anymore. The world is less of a good place, subjectively to me and anybody else who likes the song of the songbirds, to enjoy them. It's not as good as it was or it could be if we hadn't introduced cats to the environment. Now we can look at statistics of these animals, of these birds, and how they propagate and where they live, what their populations are like, what their populations would be like without predation by certain individual species, so we can produce data of a better world. We can look, and I do this because this is a research project I found myself stumbling into when I was working on a response to this, but we can build a world on math, on facts, to that is more ideal than the one that we live in. And we can say, if we bring these levels down, if we, again with the cat analogy, if we reduce the cat population, the bird population will increase, and it will be better for the natural environment as it exists. It'll be better for us as humans, because if we enjoy songbirds, maybe you don't enjoy songbirds. It's subjective. But I think all value judgments are subjective. I present to me that I'm wrong, because I'm a cultural relativist. So maybe that's a different position that you're taking, that you're starting from, Brian. But I don't see any further reason to go down this route of argument to say that, we can't envision a better world without God, because we can't envision a better world with math and science and understanding how different chemicals react to each other, how different organisms react to each other. We can make conclusions based on data. That's what we do, and that's what we're doing with this climate science. So get with it, buddy.
Thing that transcends the facts that we observe in the natural world. It must come from outside the natural world, since it doesn't come from inside, which makes it a question of
why must it come from outside the world. Value judgments are subjective. We are all okay. So when it comes to morality, which is what he's going to come down to in this argument, people say you can either have objective or subjective reality. Objective reality is, of course, calling it objective reality is kind of a cop-out, because if it's God's morality, then it's subjective to God and his creation. But for the sake of argument, let's say this objective reality comes from God. They want to say subjective reality means that every individual makes their own determination on their personal morality. That's not even close to true. We have innate things about us as a member of our species. As a mammal, you have innate things about you that inform your moral position. As a primate, you have innate things about you that inform your moral position. As a Homo sapien, You have innate things about you, specific to Homo sapien, that inform your moral position. As a member of a specific culture, you have innate things about you, and growing up in that culture that inform your morality. The family or tribe that you grew up in have innate things about them that inform your morality. Your personal relationships and the way you've interacted with people in the past have innate things about that inform your morality. Your individual thoughts and personal experiences that are yours and yours alone have innate things about them that inform your morality. Your morality is built on a structure, a pyramid of experience and biology and history that cannot be denied. It does not need to come from a third party. It just needs to be built on a strong foundation of what you are and what values matter to you. And those are going to be subjective to you on each one of those levels. But you will see lots of crossover and variation that creates a three-dimensional gradient of where people stand on the moral compass of what is right and wrong on a multitude and myriad of social, economic, and moral issues.
Metaphysics, the supernatural, and the transcendent. And that makes it a question for the philosopher or the theologian, but it is not something that the atheist can speculate about unless he or she abandons their atheism in the process. So really,
so you have to abandon your atheism when you write, when you play Dungeon Master Ring, because if you cannot envision a world of fantasy without God. So you have to abandon everything that comes from the imagination. You don't get credit for that. None of you imagine anything or get credit for that. God puts that in your head. That is how that works, according to Brian Holdsworth.
If atheists want to contribute to a conversation about climate change, all they can really say is things like climate change is happening and look, here's some data about it. Mm-hmm. What they can't say is this is bad and we have to do something about it. We have to.
Yes, we can, because we can present data about that too. We can say that this is bad if we want to sustain the world that supports life, so that supports human life or animal life, plant life, whatever. If you want to make that, we can make that case that if our goal is to make a better world for our future generations to be able to thrive in, it's objective. Then we can say this is objectively bad. I say objectively, but I mean for us as a species, for sustaining a world that humans can live on and other organisms too for future generations. We can say that.
We have to prevent this tragedy from unfolding, because any attempt to do that is to try to introduce knowledge of something that transcends the mere natural observed facts.
But we're still appealing to something that is fact, though. We can look at the numbers and the data and know that it's a fact that the carbon emissions are skyrocketing, that it's having a negative impact on the climate of the planet. We can look at facts about that. We're not having to draw from some fanciful idea. We're looking at numbers, buddy.
They're smuggling in a vision of what ought to become that isn't observed through the natural facts and isn't observed through science, which by their own...
It's not what ought to become. It's what is best for sustainability. It's not. This isn't an ought claim that the world ought to be able to sustain life. We're not making what ought to be. We're saying if we as a species want to continue to thrive on this planet and create a planet that our descendants can thrive on, we need to take these measures.
Own insistence is all that there is. But you know who can talk about what ought to be done is theists, metaphysicians, and true philosophers, because by our own creeds, we admit that there is something more that transcends the physical facts. So we can talk about potential worlds and which ones are preferable.
So can we. With data, we can say, if we change these numbers, this is the world that we will create. I don't know what you're talking about. It's not a moral world.
So if I can talk about Catholic theists for a second, which is my own tribe, what is it that we can offer and contribute to that conversation? Well, again, any solution that we offer must place human need and human life at the center of all other considerations. There can't be any discussion about protecting the planet or protecting the environment apart from human need, because That's just nonsense, as we observed earlier. And that's a problem for us because a lot of the proposals we get from environmentalists and green policymakers don't seem to respect or appreciate what is best for the largest number of people, especially the poor. So why do I say that? Because the first immediate solution
they do actually, because in climate change is already impacting these poor third world countries that you don't seem to realize, that they're affecting the farm life, the pastoral life of these less developed, poor pastoral and agricultural countries. We are already seeing this. Our inaction to reduce our carbon footprint is negatively impacting the poor already.
Keep hearing from policymakers and environmentalists is that we have to stop using fossil fuels and we have to go carbon neutral. We have to turn off the taps on affordable energy in favor of renewable energy. Well, here's the problem with that. Renewable energy isn't nearly as affordable or reliable as fossil fuels are. Maybe it will be someday, and maybe when that day comes, that would be great, and we could make a trend.
We're there. I mean, we're getting to a point where our green energies and hybrid models are becoming sustainable and becoming usable. So shut up, Brian. You don't know what you're talking about here, friend. I didn't mean to be so mean to say tell him to shut up, but this is really a topic that he does not have any knowledge on whatsoever, and it doesn't seem like he's done any research unless he just did research with a very biased lens, because you can go to different countries' environmental or agricultural government pages and see the measures and the subsidies. In the U.S., we are subsidizing farmers for yield loss due to climate change. We are already doing this.
Transition over to renewable energy as long as it doesn't hurt or disrupt vulnerable economic systems and the vulnerable people who rely upon them. But until then, turning off
climate change is affecting the vulnerable economic systems. Again, we are subsidizing and reporting losses on crops because of climate change. What are you talking about? Not switching over is causing the harm to the poor folks that you're talking about. It's causing economic stress. Not moving over is the problem.
Off the taps to affordable energy means forcing untold millions, maybe even billions of people into desperate poverty because they can't afford the necessities of life like food, shelter, and warmth.
They cannot do food and shelter because of climate change, because they can't produce crops anymore, because they can't raise their cattle anymore, because desertification due to climate change, because of droughts and blights. There are things that are happening in the world right now, disasters that you seem ignorant about. And how did you even research climate change and not pick up on the fact that there are less developed less developed countries in the world where people are struggling due to the impacts of climate change? And you don't even have to go out of the country, because the U.S. government is subsidizing farmers because of loss due to climate change. Again, I don't know. I keep hammering this point, but he's ignoring so much data.
Warmth, or perhaps air conditioning for their homes. We heat and we cool our homes. We farm our food. We transport that food, and we make use of necessary travel for things like work because of the availability of affordable energy. But going carbon neutral means ending affordable energy.
Do you think that gas prices right now are affordable? Do you think it's more affordable to buy, my UK people, I'm going to talk American measurements here, sorry, buy, do you think $4 a gallon for fossil fuel? And this is artificial inflation too. It's not just that fossil fuels are unaffordable, it's that the industry that produces them falsely increases the price of them. You know, they take oil from Texas, drive it to Oklahoma, and then sell it back to Texas so that they can drive up the cost on it and charge the people more because of the transportation of the oil to the refinery and then back out to the public. It's artificial inflation to make more money to fleece the poor. The fossil fuel industry fleeces the poor and is bad for the people who aren't profiting directly from fossil fuels.
Here's what Nobel Prize-winning Yale economist William Nordhaus said. He said, for any policy to be effective in solving global warming, it must raise the market price of carbon, which will raise the market prices of fossil fuels and the products of fossil fuels. Obviously, things like gas and natural gas and oil and all of these kinds of things will go up in price, but the things that we don't appreciate will go up in price are almost all of the products that get manufactured in warehouses that can...
William Nordhaus is not your ally. I'm going to read just a quick quote from William Nordhaus. Where were we? In Reflections of Economics of Climate Change in 1993. So this is, 30 years ago. Mankind is playing dice with the natural environment through a multitude of interventions, injecting into the atmosphere trace gases like the greenhouse gases or ozone-depleting chemicals, engineering massive land use change, such as deforestation, depleting multitudes of species in their natural habitats, even while creating transgenic ones in the laboratory, and accumulating sufficient nuclear weapons to destroy human civilization. Under the climate change model, he has developed in general those sectors of the economy that depends heavily on unmanaged ecosystems. That is a very heavy dependent on natural occurring rainfall, runoff, and temperatures, all things that are suffering now more than ever. Will be the most sensitive to climate change. Agriculture, forestry, outdoor recreation, and coastal activities fall into this category. Nordhaus takes seriously the potential catastrophic impacts of climate change. Nordhaus in 2007. The review's unambiguous conclusions about the need for extreme immediate action will not survive the substitution of discounting assumptions that are consistent with today's marketplace. So the central question about global warming policy, and this is, again, he's not a climate scientist, so I'm going to forgive the use of the term global warming there. He's an economist. How much, how fast, and how costly remains open. The review informs, but it does not answer the fundamental questions. So Nordhaus is not your ally in this topic, Brian. He strongly disagrees with you.
Consume a lot, and factories that consume a lot of energy. A lot of the plastics and a lot of the products that we rely upon are made from fossil fuels. And what Nordhaus says will happen is exactly what we have seen in countries that have aggressively pursued this kind of agenda. Germany, for example, has been trying to subsidize renewable energy by taxing affordable energy, which has led to utility cost increases of up to 50% for the working class just over the past decade. And the worst part of...
When, I can't remember what year it was. It was a warm year, though. Was it Germany who ended up, the government sent money back to people because their private renewable energy sources were giving them a negative cost on their energy usage, basically putting power back into the grid instead of drawing from it. Yeah. Okay.
Part of that is that none of these subsidies have reduced the emissions in that time either. So the working class gets constricted by an extremely less affordable cost of living.
What about subsidizing the farmers for losing crop yield due to climate change? And I got statistics and citations on all that for you too. Place it from such sources as the FDA, the USDA, the EPA, all these different environmental organizations. And I, of course, one of my good friends is a climate scientist, Pale Blue Mama. I was hoping she would be in the side chat today, but she's been dealing with some moving stuff and getting her teenage son and herself moved into a new house. So I'm not going to fault her at all about missing out on this, but I thought she would enjoy, or maybe she'd probably pull her hair out anyway in the side chat if I'm completely honest with the crap that Brian's saying, but hopefully she'd be agreeing with everything I'm saying here. We're losing more money due to climate change now in 2022 than we would have been losing, than we would have lost had we signed into the Green New Deal.
And nothing improves as far as emissions go. And it seems to me that most green policy solutions are a lot like that. Super high cost to everyone who isn't already filthy rich with no environmental benefit. Actually,
you got that backwards. The fossil fuel industry is only beneficial for people who's super filthy rich. For the rest of us, it's a net loss. Again, I defer you to the gas prices right now, artificially inflated gas prices.
The other thing that affordable fossil fuels have enabled, and this is arguably the most important consideration, so don't skip past this in your mind, is that we can use heavy equipment to perform the necessary labor to produce and then to distribute our food. Because the last time we were carbon neutral as a species was prior to the Industrial Revolution. And this was a time when the vast, overwhelming majority of people lived and worked on farms, because that's how much manpower it took to ensure that we could all feed ourselves. And those farming communities had to be localized because we couldn't transport huge amounts of grain and produce to remote areas like we can now because of fossil fuels. So just imagine for a second what would happen to our farming and agricultural sector if we made affordable fossil fuels a thing of the past. All of that heavy...
Affordable fossil fuels are a thing of the past right now, Brian, because the cost of running machinery that runs on fossil fuels is tipping the balance. Right now, the balance is in flux. It's tipping. Right now, renewable, because of, I want to say, we blame it on Putin, right? Because the gas prices... because of the war was when things really started to skyrocket. But now we're at this flux where is renewable less economic than fossil fuels? I think we're hitting that flux right now, Brian.
The equipment, which has replaced the necessary human power that we need to produce our food, would be decommissioned. Not to mention all the trucks and the trains that we...
Okay, just I grew up in the grain belt. My wife's whole family are farmers, and they have... this guy's going to talk about that too. Actually, let me let him finish his thing.
Transport our food and distribute to all the populace. But they could just replace their equipment with something that runs on electricity, right? Well, without getting into the conversation about where electricity comes from, we'll just say, yeah, okay, so farmers, you need to all buy Tesla harvesters and combines and tractors and things like that.
They already do. That's what I was getting ready to say. Farmers are on the cutting edge of renewable energy. They work very close in hand with the local agricultural and conservation departments to make sure that their farms are the farmland itself is renewable. Fossil fuel usage on the land itself is bad for the land. Please understand that, Brian, that running these fossil fuel driven machinery across their cropland is bad for the cropland. There's pollution that these things bark out. They are running on it's just there's so much negative impact to that. It's hard to even begin to articulate it, but most farmers are already ahead of that. This isn't the 1950s anymore where black smoke tractors are out there chugging along in the field. These farmers have hybrid combines, hybrid tractors that they are using now. They are setting up wind blocks. They are utilizing strips of land between fields for solar panels to help with their processing. Farmers are driving this. They are not suffering from the move to green energy. Farmers are the ones pushing it. They're the one driving. They're one of the driving forces behind it. They're also one of the ones. Farmers are the people who are suffering the most from the damages of climate change.
Well, the problem with this is that, as any farmer will tell you, they will have spent a long period of time, sometimes generations, building up their fleet of equipment. We're talking about millions of dollars of equipment here. To expect a farmer to either replace his or her fleet because they aren't allowed to burn fossil fuels anymore is basically to tell them to stop farming. And the first to suffer in a scenario like that, again, is the poor. When resources become scarce, the vulnerable are the first.
Again, the farmers are working hand in hand on these issues, and the replacement is subsidized on their government contracts because it has been shown economically to produce better yields for it's a profit across the board. Better yields, faster production, using more, because it's not just that they run. The hybrid models are just better. Hybrid combines are just better. All the bells and whistles on them are better. They're more up to date, more high tech, have more broader functions. Yeah, I don't think you did any research on this topic before you decided to dive into it.
First to go without, and that is an intolerable proposition from a Catholic perspective. But what good is affordable energy if we're all going to die from a collapsing climate, many will argue?
Right.
Well, the first thing I would say to this is that there really isn't strong evidence that that is happening or that that's going to.
False. There is only evidence that is happening. There's no evidence to the contrary. The only evidence that you have to the contrary are from the fossil fuel industry directly, and from the people they hire to say that that the data is wrong. This is where he gets ridiculous. This is where he starts making erroneous claims.
To happen. Yes, climate change is real and anthropogenic, but it isn't nearly as bad as politicians and mainstream media who rely on alarming headlines to sell advertising would lead us to believe.
And I don't disagree with you there that getting your information about climate change from politicians and from the media is a bad idea. You should get your information about climate change from the people who study climate change, from climate scientists, from agricultural economists. That's who you should be getting your information from, because they are the ones that are reviewing this data, because they are the ones that are most impacted by it. If your concern is for poor people, you need to look at the economical data reflecting what the damage from climate change and how many millions, billions of dollars we spend mitigating the effects of climate change right now in 2022. This isn't a future prediction. We are already seeing the predictions that were made back by folks like your citation there, Mr. Norhouse. He made predictions. We're seeing those predictions coming true now. This isn't speculative.
All we know is that the climate is getting slightly warmer, but we can't say with any measure of certainty what the cost of that will be, especially as compared to the potential benefit.
Yes, we can, but just because you're incredulous about it and you don't know how to map that data doesn't mean that the people don't. We have myriads of ways in which we can make predictions about future climate and about how climate has been in the past and what the expectations are in our current cycles and where we fall and why we're off of that and what is causing those changes. This is not something we cannot know. I don't know why you're saying that.
Benefits, which don't really seem to get much airtime in these conversations. Like, what about the agricultural benefits of something like a longer growing season to help feed a growing population?
Oh, yeah. So, this is an argument that if carbon dioxide is good for plants, then the carbon emission is a benefit because we can have more farmland. That's like saying if we increase the oxygen level, that it'd be better for humans because humans like oxygen, right? No, if you increase the oxygen level, it hasn't. There is a point at which we are poisoning the environment, which is what we're doing right now, poisoning the environment with carbon, and it's not going to be better for crops. I don't know where he's coming from with this. We're losing cropland, not gaining it. We are, because it's not just, the cold areas get warmer. No. The open field areas, the agricultural areas, the bread baskets get drier, turn into deserts.
What about plant life, which tends to thrive on an abundance of CO2, which may flourish in areas where it hasn't previously? And it's a common misunderstanding that the UN has given.
I want Brian to just start consuming pure oxygen when he breathes from here on out. Give him an oxygen mask, because oxygen is better for people and they will thrive better with more oxygen.
And it's just a matter of years to solve this problem before we all die. The truth is that they haven't really said anything like that. And while I'd like to spend more time on explaining what they have said, I would rather direct you to Dr. Bjorn Lomborg, who has gone through all of that data, and he summarizes and assesses the costs and the benefits of pursuing green agendas. And that's an important consideration, and one that we should be attentive to, because you may have noticed that the people who are always pushing these green policies and agendas, they never do give us cost-benefit analysis. They just say crazy things like, we're all going to die if we don't do this.
Yes, they do give you cost, but you aren't looking at that. What you are looking at is what the headlines from what AOC said or what freaking Al Gore said 30 years ago. That's what you're looking at. No, we release the FDA releases. Oh goodness, hold on. Let me just. The FDA releases reports on this stuff. The EPA releases reports on this stuff. The USDA releases reports on this stuff. Just because you don't look at it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I hope you guys are seeing this. Yeah. USDA, right here. Whole websites dedicated to climate solutions. Climate solutions right there. USDA, EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, showing the issues, what we're seeing, these droughts that I was talking about, where we're seeing the agricultural areas getting hit by drought seasons that are reducing crop yields by up to 15%. The impact on livestock, this is all documented. We can see this impact on fisheries. Look at these schematics. This isn't speculation, Brian. This is stuff that there's actually releases of. We know how this is happening. Please stop with the disinformation campaign, buddy.
Which is the kind of hysteria that is absolutely not conducive to sober and thoughtful discourse and action. Lastly, if I can introduce the faith dimension into this conversation for a second, for those of us that come from a Judeo-Christian tradition, if we're attentive to it, we will notice that in the story of the fall of humanity in the book of Genesis,
if you come from a Judeo-Christian or Judeo position, be a good steward. Your book tells you to. Be a good steward and help us take care of the planet. Together we can do this, Brian.
When our ancestors sinned against God for the first time prior to that, they were living in a condition that was in a complete and natural harmony between the human creature and creation. In the garden, there was no disharmony. The ground and the plant life provided everything that they needed. But when Adam and Eve disobeyed God and ruptured their relationship and their harmony with God and therefore creation and everything that he created, there's an interesting sequence in the consequences that Scripture records. The first thing that God does is he curses the serpent who tricked them because, yeah, what a jerk, right? But he doesn't curse Adam and Eve. Instead, he curses the ground beneath them so that it will no longer provide for them as it once did, forcing Adam, and specifically Adam, to toil painfully to acquire the food that they need. Which means that because of the rupture with the Creator, creation would no longer persist in a state of harmony with itself and with us. Now, whether you consider that to be a matter of history or a myth, the essential takeaway that Scripture records and recognizes is that there was a harmony between us and the environment, and that harmony should exist. And it traces the effect of what we now find in our...
So, is your argument that we shouldn't worry about climate change because in the mythology of your religion, there's a magical curse on the land that's causing climate change? So since it's a magical curse, that there's nothing we can do about it. I don't believe in magic, Brian. I don't believe in curses. I believe in data that we can see that we are killing our not when I say killing our planet, I do mean that completely hyperbolically, because things will survive. My cockroaches will survive. A lot of my bugs will survive. Humans, on the other hand, yeah.
Our tension with the environment that we live in, to our disharmony with God through sin. A massive takeaway from this that we should be attentive to is that for people of faith, that harmony that existed in the garden, that will never be recovered until God restores all creation to himself, including us. We will always be forced to labor against systems of the world to survive because the world is cursed to persist in a fashion that treats us as somehow incompatible with it. So if environmental care and being a good steward of creation is an important thing to you, it would follow that the very first step is to seek first the kingdom, seek harmony with God. In other words, become holy, be sanctified, be transformed by God's grace. And as you do so, you may find yourself operating in ways by virtue in uniformity with the natural world. That is the condition and the state that will naturally produce solutions to our problems. And those are the kinds of people that we should be listening to.
Oh, goodness. You got me so worked up. He just doesn't know what he's talking about. And he's just making hollow claims about our climate and about what data is being presented. I couldn't believe he would sit there and say that they don't present models and economic models that demonstrate. Hold on, I gotta fix my hair. It's getting all bobbling around, getting excited, and now starting to hate the term Judeo-Christian. I agree. Let me catch up with the chat here before we move into the main event, which I believe people are probably anxious for, and that is the woke dinosaurs. Yes, I do pronounce data correctly. Data. There are. I do say data entry. I don't. Well, maybe I don't. I say data entry. That's right. I don't know if there's any position where I say. Anyway. Let's see here. Yeah, I am breathing, John. Yes, and Scott Duke just getting in front of the camera and making stuff up. That's how apologists work. Oh, Lori's here. Hey, Lori. Woolly Ignorant. Bzz. Good to see ya. Hope that you all enjoyed that little delve into Creation Watch with Brian Holdsworth. I got my blood pressure up. Sinned against God. I don't believe in magical curses that create climate change. That's just not something I believe in. Brian, you're welcome to believe in it. I don't. And I think that whether you think that climate change is a magical curse or the results of a demonstrable anthropocentric impacts, it doesn't really matter. We could still be a good steward and help us fix the environment, help us be beneficial to our future generations. I don't want them to resent us. I want my descendants, or the descendants that, if I don't have any descendants, that's fine, but the descendants of our species that get to live on this planet in the future, to be able to experience the world as we experience it, and the wildlife and the ecology of organisms around the world. That's my goal. That is what I plan on.
Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the land of Egypt for the locusts, so that they may come into the land of Egypt and eat every plant in the land, all that the hail has left." So Moses stretched out his staff over the land of Egypt, and the Lord brought up an east wind upon the land all that day and all that night. When it was morning, the east wind had brought up the locusts. The locusts came up all over the land of Egypt and settled on the whole country of Egypt. Such a dense swarm of locusts as had never been seen before, nor ever will be seen again. They covered the face of the whole land, so that the land was darkened, and they ate all the plants in the land, and all the fruit of the trees that the hail had left. Not a green thing remained, neither tree nor plant of the field throughout the whole land of Egypt. Then Pharaoh hastily called upon Moses and Aaron and said, "I have sinned against the Lord your God and against you. Now, therefore, forgive my sin, please, only this once, and plead with the Lord your God only to remove this death from me." So he went out from Pharaoh and pleaded with the Lord, and the Lord turned the wind into a very strong west wind, which lifted the rocks and drove them into the Red Sea. Not a single locust was left in the country of Egypt. But the Lord hardened Pharaoh's heart, and he did not let the people of Israel go.